All right. Well, good afternoon once again, and welcome to this TrendSoft GP year-end close webinar. My name is Bobby Haggard, and I'm one of the consultants here at TrendSoft. We're excited that you all have joined this webinar, and hopefully it's just a quick review as we get ready to close out 2023 in Dynamics GP. Now, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We did go ahead and put all of the phones and mics on mute to try and cut down on some of that background noise. If you have a question, which we absolutely encourage, please use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar tool. We have a couple coworkers who will be monitoring those questions. We'll look to either answer them at the conclusion of the webinar or possibly throughout the webinar if there's an opportunity to do so. Secondly, if you're interested in the presentation slides or the video recording, drop your email into the Q&A. We'll know exactly what that means. We'll get that sent your way once that does become available in the next couple of days. Finally, I'll have my email at the end along with my phone number. If you have any questions about the close process within GP and it's not covered here or it's specific to your organization, drop me an email, give me a call, and I'll be sure to get you connected with one of our technical teammates so that we can walk through the specifics about your organization's close. All right, with all of our housekeeping stuff out of the way, I will stop my video and we'll jump into this GP year-end webinar review. So let's start with our agenda. We start by going over a few pre-close steps that we recommend our clients do. We'll next go over the general overview process to the GP close. We'll discuss the order of operations of the various modules. I'll go into each of those modules individually, talk about the close process, how it's run, a few key points to keep in mind, and then we'll take questions at the end of that as well. So again, drop those questions into the Q&A, drop your email into the Q&A if you're interested in the video recording. All right, let's first start with a few pre-close steps. So obviously before you perform the actual closing steps, there's a couple of pre-closed routines and operations that we recommend and encourage our clients to perform. First, make sure that all of your invoices, batches, adjustments, inventory counts, whatever it may be, related to the year that you are closing have been entered and posted. Obviously, that sounds pretty self-explanatory, but that's just a key first step. Second, make sure that you have performed a quick review of your account type setup to ensure that all of your balance sheet and profit and loss accounts are set up appropriately. We encourage you to do this by running a quick smart list, quickly review the accounts to make sure that they aren't set up wrongly. I can't stress this enough in how just this simple step in the pre-close kind of checklist will save you a ton of time at the end. It's much easier to make that change up front than to see a balance sheet account that you thought was a balance sheet account close to retained earnings, or a P&L account balance roll forward that you thought was a P&L account, etc. And so it's just much easier to catch that on the front end than it is having to reclose the year. If you do find an account that's wrong, navigate to the account maintenance window, which I'll show in just a moment. On the next slide, and I'll show you where to update that. Once you've reviewed those account types, it's time to set up the new fiscal year by navigating to the fiscal period setup window, entering the year, the start and end dates, and we'll go over that as well. Another step we encourage clients to take is to save a lot of your key reports. So if you have any type of inventory reports, any type of aged APAR, whatever those type of reports that are critical to your business, save those. It's just a nice snapshot that you can kind of have before you perform that close process. We encourage you. We know that on the GP product, there are all kinds of ISV third-party products that connect to GP that work hand in hand with GP. Verify that your third-party products don't require any type of service pack, hotfix, or anything like that to be installed prior to closing the year or going into the new year. Finally, we encourage you to take a backup of the database. If there's any questions on how to take a backup or you need help doing that, please reach out. We'll get you connected to our TrendSoft consulting team. We'll be happy to help do that. Once you have that backup, we encourage you to restore that into a test company and then run through the close in that test company. It's a great way to iron out your processes, be sure there aren't any kinks or issues prior to running the close in the live company database. If you have any questions with this process, the backup, the restore, or running through that pre-close test, please reach out to our team. And again, we'll be happy to walk through those with you. All right. Now that we have these pre-close concepts or pre-close recommendations made, let's look at the actual GP closing process. And first, here is that smart list. Or account window. So once you run that smart list and you've identified any accounts that may have been just set up incorrectly in the last year, you can navigate there to the posting type. You see there's just a little radial for balance sheet or P&L. Just make that adjustment, whichever way that needs to be done, and that will again save you a ton of time in the close process. Secondly, I mentioned setting up those fiscal periods for the next year. So when you are ready, navigate to the fiscal period setup window. First, you'll want to enter the new year. Secondly, you will enter the first day and the last day of that year, and then you'll enter the number of periods. So again, most are on the 12-month calendar period. If you're doing something unique, 454, whatever that may be, you can set that up. And then finally, you hit calculate. This will generate your periods. One thing to note, just a little tip here, a nice tip here, you can override that period 1, period 2 to be January, February, March, whatever it is that you want to name your period. So that can be updated if needed. All right, and then once you're done with that, select OK. From there, we can begin to close the year, and it's important to note the order of closing the various modules is important. Microsoft recommends that the order that's outlined here from top to bottom is the proper area or the proper order to close these various modules. Again, if you don't use a specific module or one of these areas in GP, you don't have to close it. You can just skip that and obviously go to the next area. So first up, we would recommend you close payroll. Obviously, it's its own module. It's independent of these other areas, but it always needs to be done at the end of the calendar year. After you close payroll, you'll then start with the inventory module, followed by receivables, payables, fixed assets, analytical accounting, and then finally the general ledger area. Now, it is important to note that if any of you are running analytical accounting, it's only a separate close if you're on an older version of GP. On the more current versions of GP, that AA module is actually embedded within the general ledger section. So that, again, may not be applicable to you unless you're one of our clients running an older version of GP. Now, again, a few things to keep in mind here, looking at these various close steps and processes. These close processes are generally located under the routines menu group in each of the functional areas. If you need assistance with any of these steps, please let us know again. And then finally, Microsoft has a lot of really good documentation on the GP close process within Customer Source, or reach out to us and we'll be happy to, again, direct you to some of those resources as well. So, all right, let's quickly dive into each one of these functional areas. First up, payroll. As I mentioned, payroll is its own module and it operates separate module from closing and is performed separately as well. So for clients running payroll, it's important that you first complete all payrolls for the current year. Once you complete, you'll need to install the latest tax update. Similar to applying a service pack, we can obviously help if you need to. And when you perform the close process in payroll, this will create the year-end file, which you will use to create your W-2s. These W-2s can then be processed manually or filed through Greenshade if needed. We also encourage our clients to allow a little bit of extra time to test that first payroll of the new year. So I really encourage my clients on GP, take a few moments, set your calendar, look at a calendar, understand when your last payroll of the current year is, when your first payroll of the next payroll run of the next year will be, so you can plan accordingly on when to make this year and close process. Let's quickly hit on W-2s within GP as well. First, again, make sure that you have the latest payroll tax update running, in this instance for the 2023 calendar update. Next, you'll want to be sure that you complete any of the pay runs. So again, be sure you've posted everything within the current year. Users will then want to complete all payroll related procedures, just like you would at a regular month end, quarter end, just like you normally would. Once completed that final payroll, you will need to run an update and create and verify your year-end file. Users can then install and verify the next year's payroll update. So in this instance, this would be 2024 calendar year update. And then the last step would be to close the fiscal periods within the payroll series. This would prevent any users from mistakenly posting into the wrong period or the wrong year by mistake. All right, within inventory, before closing the year in the inventory module, be sure that all inventory related transactions have been posted. This would include invoicing, sales order processing, inventory transactions, any recycle counts or physical count adjustments, and just give it one quick review that all of those final transactions have been posted and you're ready to perform that close routine within the inventory module. When that process runs in GP, this will again close and transfer all summarized current year quantities, cost, and sales amounts to transaction history for items which have been keeping a summarized sales history. Quantity sold field for each item is reset to 0, and the close process also updates quantity in each item's beginning quantity field to quantity on hand for each site. Finally, there is an option when you perform the close to clean up discontinued items and lot attributes for items that have been completely sold out. There's a checkbox that you'll see that you just have the option to enable or not prior to running that close process. One thing to keep in mind, it's important that users know there's not a year-end close related report that runs at the end of the inventory module once it's closed. So in this module, when the inventory close process is complete, it's just finished. There's not a finalized report. So if there's any specific inventory related reports that you want to run, be sure and do those ahead of time before running the year-end close for the inventory module. And then just like in the payroll module, and the other areas as we go forward, if you want to just be sure you're completely locking down each module as you go, you can navigate to the fiscal periods module and close out just that module so that no one can post back or post prior if you need to. All right, next up is receivables. So before performing any of the close processes for receivables area, once again, it's important to be sure all of your sales receivable batches, everything for the current year is obviously posted. Once we do that, we certainly recommend that any of your that you run a reconciliation, for those customer and trial balance to reconcile to the GL. And then once that close runs, it's going to move everything from a year-end routine. It's going to run that routine, and just like it's going to clear everything from your calendar year-to-date finance charges to last year's calendar date field. So in each of those respective areas, it's going to move that to the last year figure. Again, it's important to note there's some smart list objects and some summary reports that are sensitive to this current year to date and last year to date numbers. So it's just very important to take a quick look or review of those once you're completed. And then just like in the prior areas, if you want to be ultra conservative and lock down each module, go ahead and do that within the fiscal period setup and lock down the receivables module to prior period posting. All right, next up is payables. You'll see that payables close steps are very similar to the receivable steps. So obviously you want to be sure all of your payable area items and batches are posted. You'll want to be sure you do a quick reconciliation to your vendor trial balance, the GL, be sure you reconcile there. And then obviously the close steps, very similar to receivables. They're closing out the last close date. There's going to be a smart list object update, and vendor summary reports will be updated along the way. And then finally, just like in the previous module, if you want to be super conservative, lock down that fiscal period for payables as well. Now, while we're talking about payables, let's quickly hit on 1099 reporting. First, it's important to know that 1099s are not connected to your year-end close process. So you can absolutely close out the year and then come back and do 1099 at a later date. So again, you can do 1099 separately. It's important to know too that your 1099 can be printed manually through GP or through a third-party product like Green Shades or someone else. Keep in mind that the 1099 NEC non-employee compensation form that was new a couple of years ago, that's still out there within GP. You can still absolutely print that. And again, if you have any questions or need help with that, please reach out to us. Within GP, it's important to make sure that the vendor is set up correctly from the start. We encourage clients to ask for a W-9 upfront to get those set up along the way. As a reminder, you can manually edit 1099 amounts if throughout the year through the 1099 details window, which we'll look at. However, we do encourage users to set up those vendors correctly initially to save you some of this manual work on the back end. And then there is that print option under routines within the payables area to run these 1099s, and we'll look at a couple of those windows now. So within the vendor maintenance window, as I discussed, here you can see the areas around 1099 that you can make sure that that vendor is set up properly. So as you see here in the highlighted fields, there is the tax type and the 1099 box, and those can obviously be adjusted by the various drop downs as needed. We can also look at where to update the 1099s manually, and that is here in the 1099 details window. So as I mentioned, you do have the ability to manually edit 1099 amounts if needed. So users can enter the vendor ID, they can update the boxes as needed, and then they can click save. And again, once you've made those updates, your 1099s will be set up and report properly printed from this window. All right, so next up is how to print these 1099s. And again, you go to the routine section within the payables area. Once ready to print, you'll enter your federal ID number, 1099 year, and the type of report that you're wanting to run. And then you can see there in the lower left-hand corner, you can select which type of form you want to print and run. And again, you can run it on all vendors, you can run it on a range of vendors, and how you want those to run. So obviously you have those options to do that as well. All right, so once 1099s and payables are complete, you then move to fixed assets module, which again, shouldn't be closed until your payables module has been fully closed first. If you have multiple fixed asset books, you can close them each separately. However, each must be closed prior to closing the general ledger year. Prior to closing the fixed assets module, be sure to post any additions, charges, transfers, retirement, or depreciation that maybe hadn't been posted throughout the year. Be sure and catch that up. And then once that fixed asset process close run, it'll be looking to clear year-to-date fields in the current year. Cost and life-to-date depreciation will be updated, and this will include your reserves, your salvage values, et cetera. And so your current year, fiscal year is updated to the next year as well. So a couple of the key updates made during that fixed assets close process. And then again, a key aspect to know about the fixed assets module is that it's important to run year-end reports and reconcile reports prior to closing this module, just again as a good test. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, newer versions of GP, the analytical accounting module, is included within your general ledger close, and there's not any specific steps for that close to take place. But if you're running an older version of GP and you're not on the most current version, and analytical accounting is still separate, then there is a few things to keep in mind. So if this is the first time you're closing analytical accounting on that newer version, then GP will prompt you to move some data to history before the system will allow you to close the year, which you could certainly do. Again, we encourage you to review the setup of your analytical accounting options window prior to closing for the first time. And if you use analytical accounting and you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact our TrendSoft support team. We'll be more than happy to help answer those for you. All right. Once we're ready to move on to the general ledger close, once we've closed out all these other modules, we're ready to perform our general ledger close. So as I mentioned earlier, this is your last chance to double check that all of these account types are set up correctly. And again, it's much easier to correct this on the front end than it is the back end. And literally, as many times as we warn about this, it inevitably happens to somebody, and we get a call where, hey, Bobby, we had an account set up wrong. We need some help reversing the year. Good news, we can do that. But again, I'm just trying to warn you. Let's get these caught up and set up in the first before we do the close. Secondly, take another backup. This is a great time. If you close out all the other modules, take a backup to save your steps along the way, so you don't have to go back to the very beginning. So if something goes wrong during the GL close, we can restore it at this point and make any updates as we need. So again, take that backup. If you need help with that, reach out to our TrendSoft team. We'll be happy to help with that. Another key step before running the close process, double check your GL setup and ensure that the proper account is selected for your retained earnings account. Confirm the setting through the general ledger setup window, which we'll show you in a minute, and double check that correct retained earnings account is selected. Now, when the GL is closed, all profit and loss accounts are rolled into retained earnings, and your balance sheet accounts are rolled into beginning balance for that account. Inactive accounts with no balance and no historical transactions can be removed. There's options for that. And then finally, the year that was just closed is marked as historical, and the fiscal periods table are updated, marking that year as historical as well. Once the close process is run, be sure to save that year-end close report as needed, whether you print that off and save it hard copy, whether you save it digitally, completely up to you, but please save that report. And then finally, as I mentioned, in all of the other areas, be sure to close that physical period. You don't want somebody posting into a prior period, into a prior module, into a previously closed year. That'll obviously throw some wrench in your plan. So please close those periods. Now, it is important to note, in the unfortunate event that something does go wrong, there are a couple options. First, you'll see that there will be a reverse year-end close option, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. Second option would be to load that backup that we took in one of the earlier steps, so that you can recreate that or redo that close process if you need to. So again, if something does go wrong, it's not the end of the world. Take a deep breath. There's a couple options that we'll talk about. All right, so let's look at a couple things here. So first up is that GL setup window. This is where users will confirm that retained earnings account is selected. So I have that highlighted there, just so you can see in the general ledger setup window. Just take a peek at that retained earnings account. You'll see that there are also boxes for maintaining history and a couple other features that you can allow or not allow there. And we'll be happy to go through any of these with you if you'd like to discuss further. Finally, when you begin to close the year, so for the GL, you're going on the financials pane, you're going to go to the routine section and select year end closing. First thing that you're going to do, double check that retained earnings account is pulled in correctly. Obviously, we just set it in the GL setup window, but just double check that that's being tagged correctly there. Secondly, there's a couple of options, checkboxes for remove unwanted segment numbers. So if you created a segment and then never used it in the year, you can remove it. That's rarely used by our clients. The next one is to maintain inactive accounts. Most people check this box so they can keep or retain any active accounts. Again, completely up to you whether you want to keep that or not. And then once you're ready, hit that close year option in the lower right-hand corner and be patient depending on the volume of data you have, your processing power, etc. This could take from a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes to, a few minutes after that. So I know a lot of times when people hit this close year in, they want it to happen instantly and then they get nervous that something's going to happen. So a few tips here. Let it run. If it's running for a few minutes and you're worried something has happened, just let it run, take a deep breath, go get a drink of water, whatever that may be. While this process is running, do not force close GP or SQL. So if your system and if you're running the year-end close and you think it's stuck and something has happened, do not go up and close GP or close SQL. That will cause more problems in the long run. So I would just encourage you, if something does happen where you think it's taking a while, A, just take a few minutes and let it run. B, reach out to our TrendSoft team and we'll be happy to, provide support or give a recommendation. When the process is complete, print that report, save it, whatever you need to do there as well. And then I will warn you, move your mouse. I've seen it happen before too, where someone will move their mouse to the close year. They'll select that button to close the year. The process will run. And then very instantly, the next thing that's up is there is a close year option again to close the next year. And they've accidentally closed that because often that's where the cancel or close button is in the prior year. So just, excuse me, just be cautious in doing that and just be diligent once you get to this window. Now, in the unfortunate event that something does happen, you mistakenly closed the year twice, you had an account that was set up to the wrong closing type, or just something went wrong and you need to make a correction or reverse it. You do have the option, as you see highlighted here, to reverse that historical year. So you reverse that year, it opens everything kind of back up to where you were before you hit close year. You can make those adjustments if you need to. If you do make adjustments, I would encourage you to take another backup if you needed to, and then close that year process again, and that'll rerun throughout the process. All right. I know we covered a lot of ground very quickly. The close process in GP is very well documented, but I hope you found some of these tips and tricks to be helpful or a quick refresher along the way. Again, if you have a question, drop that in to the Q&A. We'll be sure and get those sent to you, get those updated to you and sent answers to you. If you're interested in the video recording, drop your email into the Q&A. We'll be sure and get that sent to you again once it becomes available. And again, if you are interested in any questions, if you have a specific question about your GP year-end close web process or something specific to your organization, please take down my email, take down my phone number, or reach out to your normal TrendSoft consultant. We'll be happy to answer those along the way. So again, I see some people dropping their email into the Q&A. We'll absolutely get those sent to you for the video presentation, and we'll absolutely get those sent to you as well. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in, but again, drop your email in the Q&A. We'll be sure and get those sent to you. No problem. And then we certainly wish you the best during this close process. If anything comes up, please reach out to us. We'll absolutely get you pointed in the right direction or help to answer any of those questions. So again, we wish you the best in closing. You can certainly do this. If anything comes up, please reach out to our team. With that, we'll wrap this webinar and wish you all a great end of the year, and we look forward to working with you in 2024. Thank you, guys.